I'm Greg Watson, and this is my shop here in Butte County. You can see it's in the form of a livestock barn here, but inside it's pretty high-tech, and we enjoy and benefit from the good woodworking equipment. We're out in farm country, and as a person who designs things, I wanted to be respectful of the environment. So I built this cabinet shop that we have here, not only to be useful as a cabinet shop, in the interior it is, but also to be respectful and responsive to the qualities one associates with a pastoral environment. Well, as long as you're here for a visit, why don't we go on inside and take a look at the cabinet shop. Well, we just come in through the side door of the cabinet shop here at G. Watson Designs. This is the bench area where fellows work at the bench. We have a sort of a amalgam. It's a classic bench shop where people actually know how to sharpen chisels and use hand planes in addition to the millwork machinery you have. But you see here these great bench setups that guys can work on. Dead flat surfaces for accurate assemblies, a classic cabinet maker's bench associated with each one, and downdraft for when fellows are sanding or working with dust generating processes. It keeps the area safe and clean. It's nice. Here we have the CNC center, the flat version of it we got from Laguna. We use this for panel processing in general, getting wonderful accurate cabinet parts, but in addition we use it for carving. Here we have a cluster of covered with dust, but the 3 shapers that we'll set up for cope and stick processes for door assemblies, and an edge banding machine. In the vein of panel processing, we do have a sliding table saw, just wonderful. You can get very accurate rectilinear parts out of it. You can also do compound miters. This is sort of my shop within the shop. This alone is a pretty darn nice wood shop. It has the bandsaw I just showed you, a workbench here that's like the others. I also have a lathe and a scroll saw for doing fine cutting, a drill press, 3 more shapers that we usually we set them up for a variety of things. So we do jig cutting on them or molding generation. Working on a little rustic bench for a mudroom here. Got this wonderful table saw. People ask occasionally, what's the one tool? This is the one tool. The best table saw you could possibly get is the one thing you want to have as a cabinet maker. Better than anything else, you can do so much with it. Here we have the shaper setup. Our new addition that we got a little over a year ago, this 4th axis CNC lathe. It doesn't work as a lathe because it doesn't typically spin the parts to cut them. It works as a milling machine, but it allows us to fabricate. So you see a symmetrical turning on here with carved acanthus leads, but this could be asymmetrical. It could be a cabriole leg. It could be a statue of David, and you could do that on this machine through the strategies that it enables you to achieve. The joy that I take in the design process is really the joy of seeing the client thrilled. My objective is to be an advocate for the client's taste. So I learn to understand that person's taste and empathize with the client, and then develop designs that represent what pleases them. And that's really the focus of the design process for me, is to thrill that client. The CNC technology allowed us to reach forward where we could bring efficiency to that crafting process and use the CNC technology in the case of carvings to do 95% of the work. Then we can finally execute the carvings by hand from that point. Very helpful and really open things up for us and for our clients. Okay, what we've done here is chucked this up into the 4th axis machine. I've developed a method where I use a spindle center off of a regular lathe and put that in the chuck. That way, once this is turned on this machine with all its carved details and whatnot, I can take the piece and go directly to the lathe and be working from the same centers. And that way I can do refined details into the piece that are only possible to do with turning chisels. The router on this uses a router, and so it's a radius tip. And so one thing that's limited without doing a bunch of different setups is having sharp edge details, fillets and whatnot. So this is a method I've developed, and what I've learned about these machines is that they are not automated in the sense that they just do it all for you. You use them the way you would use any other machine tool. which is to say you direct them, you program them, you tool them up to achieve what you want. Okay, the code's nearing, it's inspecting its code to make sure it all works. It's approaching 100%. At 100%, the spindle fires up, and we'll see how well I programmed it. Well, it looks like the Laguna fourth axis machine, the turner, has completed the work on this one part that we have here. You can see that it's to a pretty fine level of detail. From here we take it and do some hand carving to just bring it another step further. We do a lot of small problem solvers for individuals. Of course, we do large millwork projects as well, but this is a kind of job that we really enjoy taking on. In this case, the client has a vineyard and they make wine as sort of a hobby, and they had a wine barrel left over, and they have a collection of wine accoutrements. They have these tools, bottle openers, whatnot, that are antiques, and so they wanted to use a wine barrel as the basis of a display case. So what we did was engineer a wine barrel top that would be circular like the barrel's geometry, and then with glass on top, and then it could open, as you see here in this photo real rendering here, this representation of it. You can see how the drawer pivots out, giving you access to the interior. But we just love to do that kind of oddball problem solving here. It thrills the clients, and we have fun doing it. Now, we have a client that we've done work with over the years, and they have a pool house. It's called a casita, which means little house in Spanish, and it's kind of a den outdoors. And what we're doing for them here, they have the house opens up to the pool area. So these 4 doors will go across the space about 11 feet wide, and there'll be a transom above with iron, and that'll be about 10 foot tall. And so it'll all bifold back and become an open den to the pool area. So it's kind of a wonderful thing. We'll be doing an effect that makes these appear to be aged and old. All these surfaces will be hand planed and sculpted to affect a timber. The wonderful thing about the use of the CNC technology is that we've been able to compose across these panels, and there's an additional one here, but this shows the composition for the 4 panels across. So the 4 are designed as a unified group, and then the panels are then machined individually and then installed in the doors across this group. So you have symmetrical but somewhat loose composition in grape clusters. I used to do this kind of carving by hand, and then over time it became difficult to just set the time aside. The skill sets really aren't available to hire, and to have a composition that's independent across and not simply a standard cut and paste thing that's applied is something that you simply can't get in the market. The CNC technology has reintroduced the ability to hand carve unique compositions to the piece. So we're able to take these 4 doors and do, in this case it's symmetrical. Some cases, and I can show you other examples, are not, where we have the pieces growing, the work will be growing across the piece independently of the piece's geometry, and that's kind of cool. But we're able to know this is directly off the machine, then we'll come back and hand carve this, so we end up with nice and sized points. And this is one of the wonderful capabilities that the CNC technology has brought to the shop, and the clients appreciate it. I sure enjoy doing it. It leverages things forward and allows you to reapproach this kind of carving again. Something that became impractical and now is within reach. Our process is client focused, so it's not really about any taste I may have or preference I have. It's about what thrills the client, and that's our objective here. So we do a wide variety of work for a wide variety of clients with a range of design vocabularies from extremely contemporary all the way through antique reproductions of various schools of design. I have 1 panel. There were these 4 panels. We have 1 left for the side door that you saw on that design, and it's ready to fire up the machine and go to work carving. And here's where it all happens. We have the CNC router over here in the shop, obviously taking up the space that it is. It's just a wonderful augmentation and a great addition of value. You may have seen the bench areas that we have where the men do the work by hand, but this is right nearby, and there's another fellow doing work too. I'm a person who moves slowly and carefully, and with a relatively small cabinet shop doing this work, CNC technology was a bit of an investment, and I watched it for a couple of years, as it was evolving from being something not unlike computers, where they went from being only for the defense industry and NASA to something that is available because of the dropping price and the increased value. The CNC machinery went from being prohibitively expensive, and over a period of a few years, different providers were taking advantage of the evolving technologies to get to the point where they were affordable for small shops like mine. What was attractive about Laguna's was that they were putting this affordability into a model that used some of the classic things that are important in woodworking machinery. One of them is weight, that it's on a welded steel and cast base. Very, very substantial. It absorbs vibration. You'll see like all the classic woodworking machinery from Oliver or Delta, or all these older machines were built on solid cast bases. So they were stationary and all vibration was absorbed. That's fundamental. A lot of at the time I looked at and finally made a decision about a CNC router, the other offerings in a similar price point, a similar value point, were being put out as assemblies. So they were being made out of aluminum extrusions. They were bolted together as opposed to welded together, that sort of thing. All that is an invitation to failure. Whenever you have two things screwed together, at some point they're going to come loose and fall apart. Vibration is going to degrade the object over time. So that was one of the fundamentals that Laguna had right. So you tend to think and hope that if they can make that kind of decision and do that right, that they'll make similar decisions elsewhere in the technology at the same time. So yeah, I spoke to them over time, and as I said, I'm a person who approaches these things slowly and carefully, and through a kind of a courtship and exposure to it, came to a level of confidence that Laguna was the choice, and I haven't been disappointed. They were the choice, and I'm glad to speak well of them at this point. Here we're just using the mechanical hold downs. This panel will take about 2.5 hours to run, and so we're able to hold it down that way as opposed to running the vacuum pump, and that's the reasoning here. We are turning on the controller. Here we have the software loaded up to be able to run this carved panel. Despite what it says, the software always thinks when you start it up that it has the number 1 tool in it. So what you have to do, this is actually the number 8 tool, which will be our roughing cutter. Say cycle start, it starts the M6 program, which will drop off the number 1 tool and pick up the number 8 tool to initiate the rough out of the leaf panel. Where things get exciting, because you can see we had the roughing pass that brought the core shape out very efficiently, because you're using large cuts with large step overs. You see this very rough result. But now we're doing a finish pass using a 16th inch radius ball nose cutter where it's tapered so it's still strong, but it's doing this at 15% step over. So you're thinking about 1/64th of an inch step overs as it goes, this, leaving a completely smooth surface, almost sanded. As you can see, we had a very fine surface by choosing to have a small step over with a very small tool. So it's 15% of an eighth of an inch a step over each time. These machines allow this kind of precision. Traditionally, this is all done by hand, but there is no disadvantage to being able to remove 95% of the labor by using the CNC technology and do the final surfaces by hand. You end up with a hand-carved object without all that labor. It's 2 years into it now, and the machinery has proven well that it can do the work. They've stood behind the machinery where we had some of our own growth issues, so like learning how to make use of this stuff. They have been there. Their tech staff is wonderful and helpful, and where we've needed a part or two, they've been right there for us, so no disappointment.